appreciate y'all. Okay, so we will start with the first order of business, and it's policing and diversionary programs. That's sub-chaired by Ms. Hamilton. Please state your name for the record, and we'll begin.
Sure. My name is Marissa Hamilton, and our subcommittee was responsible for looking at policing and diversion programs that are currently in effect in our police departments. So the agenda
is her mic on?
Can you hear me?
Is that? Okay, try now.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Say something into the mic.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Try again. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. There we go.
There you go.
All right. My name is Marissa Hamilton. I chaired the subcommittee on policing and diversion, and the scope of our work was to identify the diversion programs that are happening in Arizona in our police departments and around the country. And I'm very excited that we have some fine men and women in blue presenting today. So I first want to get into some definitions that we discussed as part of our subcommittee, and that has to do with deflection, deferment, and diversion. And today we're really going to be talking about deflection. That is defined as it's a program pre-arrest at the discretion of the police officer, generally within the specific criteria such as nonviolent and victimless crimes. Typically when we think of diversion, we're actually thinking of either deferment or diversion programs, which are post-arrest. And just for the specifics here, that means, is my mic still on? Yeah, okay. That means deflection means no charges. There may have been an identified behavioral health issue or a well-being issue that places the person in a health risk or exposure risk to the justice system. The program diverts to treatment for clinical assessment to address needs and or social services such as mental health or substance abuse recovery. Deflection has been found to be a tremendous win. I'm just going to read that first sentence because it's so important that we look at this accurately. Policing deflection programs reduce incarceration responsibly with rehabilitation, increasing public safety with tremendous return on investment versus other criminal justice programs. It restores the relationship between the police and the public. And so essentially these programs save additional burden on the taxpayers because they happen at the point of pre-arrest. So these are people that are able to access the services that we have for things like substance abuse, mental health treatment prior to going through the justice system and the taxpayers facing the burden of incarceration, in addition to the consequences of incarceration that we then face at reentry. It should be noted that these programs are successful to the extent that the community is able to provide resources available to facilitate evidence-based rehabilitation programs. With proper investment, incarceration for nonviolent crime can be significantly reduced while public safety is improved. The programs our police departments are going to present today are relatively new, but they show early wins and great promise for Arizona to lead the nation in responsible reform. One piece of legislation, since we are talking to our legislators today, Illinois worked on SB 3023. This allows for the Community Law Enforcement Partnership for Deflection and Substance Abuse Disorder Treatment Act. This allows for our officers to basically be protected to be able to do their deflection program so that they don't face liability or lawsuits for using their program. So we have some wonderful speakers today from police departments around the state. First up, we will have Assistant Chief of Police with the Tempe Police Department, David Humble. He has over 28 years of law enforcement experience. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read through all of his amazing experience, but his law enforcement supervisory leadership spans over 20 years. After that, we'll hear a presentation from Assistant Chief Kevin Hall from Tucson. He's a 27-year member of the Tucson Police Department, joining the department in 1992. He also has an abundance of experience and service to our great state. And then out of Goodyear, we have Sergeant Mary Ward with the Goodyear Police homeless outreach team. She has been a police officer for 23 years, with the bulk of her experience in investigations. And 1 year ago, Officer Martinez and Sergeant Ward launched the homeless outreach program at Goodyear PD. The main purpose of this program is to offer help and resources to all citizens regarding homelessness in our areas. So I will turn over to our first speaker, Assistant Chief David Humble. Thank you so much.
Chief Humble, would you state your name for the record, please?
Yeah, my name is David Humble. I'm Assistant Chief of Police with the Tempe Police Department.
Thank you.
Chairman Blackman, committee members, thank you for having me this morning. Our program at Tempe PD is fairly new. What it involves, and I'll just highlight some of the bullets here. We partner with our school resource officers. That's where our program lies. And we work with our Care 7 specialists, and they are trained counselors embedded with the police department and in the schools. And we work together specifically at our three school districts: Kyrene School District, Tempe Elementary, and Tempe Union High School District. The program primarily is for first-time juvenile offenders, reference possession of marijuana and possession of drug paraphernalia. The selected crimes are where the state is the victim. So that's key in our program. The program is for first-time offenders who are not currently enrolled or have been previously enrolled in the Restorative Justice Intervention Program. The juvenile and their family, and along with the officer, must agree for participation to occur in our program. The juvenile works with our Care 7 specialists, our school counselors, and our officer. To complete the program, no juvenile criminal referral is completed. The program allows our school resource officers to work closely with our students, families, school staff, administrators, Care 7, in addressing youth diversion programs to hopefully have a successful resolution for not only the juvenile, but the family members and them moving forward. And to wrap up, basically our program, what we're trying to do is there are some distinct cases in our schools where the best option, a new option for us, is to provide counseling and try to get the juvenile on the right path rather than into the criminal justice system. So we're trying it. We've had some good successes. I spoke with our sergeant over our SRO program, Sergeant Joey Brudnock. And while every case isn't successful, the majority of them are. Again, our program is fairly new. It's fairly informal, but so far what we're seeing is we like the way it's going. So I just wanted to come today, take a few minutes. I know you're very busy, but I just appreciate Marissa inviting me and inviting the Tempe Police Department to speak in front of this committee.
Thank you. Okay, we understand. I understand that the chiefs have to get back to work, so we're going to ask the questions of the chiefs right after your presentation so you can return back to duty.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, so if you could just stick around for a second.
Of course.
Get through everyone else, we'll ask some
Thank you,
questions.
Chairman.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman and members. Next up, we have Assistant Chief Kevin Hall from Tucson PD.
Good morning, Chairman Blackman, honorable representatives. Thank you for having me this morning. I just wanted to run through real quickly what we're doing in Tucson. This is a pre-arrest deflection program. I initiated back in July of 2018. However, it actually started long before that when we initiated our naloxone program. We were the second city in Arizona to issue naloxone to all of our officers, and at least to this date, as far as I know, we're still the largest city in Arizona that have all of my 400 patrol officers carry naloxone. To date, we've had over 50 naloxone reversals. From that program, we started our deflection program. We began looking at what we call pocket drugs, small amounts of drugs, both felony and misdemeanor amounts, including paraphernalia, where we were looking at these arrests as potentially being much more healthy for the community to divert these folks to treatment rather than incarceration. It's a pre-arrest program, which means that utilizing officer discretion, that the folks are diverted away from and what we call deflected away from the criminal justice system completely. There are no charges placed, and they are taking from wherever the officer had contact with them. The charges are never administered, and they're taken to treatment. The taken to treatment to our 24/7 clinic of excellence. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they can be dropped off there. They have a 10-minute turnaround. This program has 3 elements to it. The first is what we call self-referral. It's shamelessly plagiarized after a program back east in Gloucester, Massachusetts, where people can simply show up at a police station. We have 4 substations in headquarters building. They can hand over whatever narcotics they have on them or paraphernalia and ask for help. They will not be arrested unless they have a felony warrant of violence. We will then facilitate their transportation to a treatment facility. The second component is what we call social referral, and it's basically the same thing, only it happens out in the field. Any community member can approach an officer who is out in the field, either doing paperwork at lunch, on a call for service, and do the same thing, hand over whatever they have on them. That contraband will be destroyed, and the officer will facilitate the community member being transported to treatment. And then the last part is what we call true deflection. That's where criminal charges do exist, either misdemeanor or felony. Generally for pocket drugs, there is a list of criteria that we go through. It's generally 2 grams or less of narcotics and paraphernalia. Generally, it's a victimless crime. A lot of times what we find is we come across these folks during misdemeanor, say, shoplifting calls. And in the course of the arrest of the shoplifting, we find narcotics, so it immediately becomes a felony. At that point in time, the officers can engage the victim. If the victim is amenable to it, the charges are not pressed. And once again, the folks are taken to treatment rather than incarceration, avoiding the entire criminal justice system. To date, we have deflected over 700 individuals, and that's from July 1st of 2018 until this month. That's 700 individuals who are not facing felony narcotic charges, who are not placed into the criminal justice system, and who did not face the burden of the criminal justice system upon them in what we consider a public health crisis. I think it's pretty well established that addiction, substance misuse is a public health issue. It's a neurobiological disease, and it should not be addressed by the criminal justice system, in our opinion. Our program is viewed as a national model. I just got back from Houston presenting on it. I'm set to go to Florida again to present on it again. We were just awarded recognition by the Bureau of Justice Assistance out of the Department of Justice as a national learning and mentor site, meaning that they're going to provide funding to at least 5 to 6 other cities throughout the nation to send their teams to Tucson to learn from our program, replicate the program if possible, look at our best practices, and then go back to their jurisdiction and hopefully set up a program similar. We also have, 2 years ago, we were listed as a learning and mentor site by the Bureau of Justice Assistance with our mental health team. This whole program was based off of our mental health program. I simply replicated it, where we do the same thing with those who are in crisis or suffering from a mental health issue. Rather than take them to jail, we take them to treatment. We have a crisis response center in Tucson. Once again, it's a 10-minute, no wrong door turnaround. We drop them off if the crisis response unit or our Codex Center of Excellence determines it's not a crisis problem or a substance abuse problem. They make sure they're diverted to another place, either a sobriety facility or a mental health facility or another facility to fulfill those needs.
Chief,
I know I'm out of time, so
yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Next up, we have Sergeant Mary Ward and Officer Jonathan Martinez presenting for Goodyear Police.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm Sergeant Mary Ward. I'm part of the Goodyear Homeless Outreach Team, which consists of myself and Officer Martinez, just the 2 of us. We started the end of September in 2018 due to an increase in homelessness that we noticed in Goodyear. It's a small city, so when there's an increase, we see that right away. Basically, our job is every day we go around, we make contact with all of our homeless community, check on their welfare. When there are crimes being committed, we try to work with them, deflect kind of deflect them away from the criminal justice system, because to continue arresting them over and over, it's just an endless circle that they never get out of, and our goal is to get them help. I can't see those two. So I think to date we've done about 1,000 contacts with homeless individuals in our city. That's not 1,000 homeless people per se, but that's contacting the same people on a daily basis. We also work we're also in charge of the crisis intervention in Goodyear, so we do quarterly trainings with the West Valley Crisis Intervention Team, and that's to train our officers across the West Valley how to recognize people who may be having mental health crisis and work with them in ways that I think in the past police departments generally haven't, and I think that's something that we're seeing across the country as well. Our deflection, mostly like Tucson PD with the small amounts of personal use drugs, since a lot of our homeless have mental health and or substance abuse issues. Rather than saying, okay, we caught this person with a personal use of heroin or methamphetamine or whatever else it is, we work with them, we offer them the resources, we try to get them into help, because a lot of them would like help but just don't know how to get it, or lack the resources to get to that help. So, and our success story, how do I change that? Just hit it. All right. When we started about a year ago, we had a young man named Joshua who was living under that tree in a retention area just off I-10 and Litchfield Road. That picture's his camp. He had been homeless for 3 to 5 years. He was addicted to heroin. Officer Martinez and I worked with him. I think we made over 175 contacts with him. And he finally entered into a methadone program and started working his way back up out of homelessness. He had fines, probationary obligations that he had to meet that was hard because he was homeless. But through working with him to get the resources through I think this program out in the West Valley called Southwest Network, he was finally able to leave his tree, and he now has an apartment in South Phoenix, and he's currently working hard on trying to find a job, which with his felony convictions, he's having a difficult time, but he still keeps trying. So he is one of our success stories. Unfortunately, with the chronically homeless, there's not a lot of them, but in the past year, I think we have 3 or 4, which I count as a victory, because that's at least 3 or 4 that aren't on the streets still using and being homeless.
That concludes our presentation. Here's a
Is that's
picture.
him right there?
Yes, that's a picture of him. He was featured on Fox 10.
Okay. Members, do you have any questions? I do. Well, okay. Wow. Whichever way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our assistant chiefs and presenters. The information that you have is fantastic. We're all in support. The one question I have is, what level of infrastructure in terms of policing or staffing do you need in order to have, the officers on the street that can really implement this? One of the mottos or mantras for seems like a decade now has been doing more with less, which I think is a shameful way to go about things. But to make sure that you officers have the time and the space you need, what do you need as far as staffing or officers, or do you, if you can answer that? How can we help?
Sure. Chairman, representative, and members, I'm going to defer that to Assistant Chief Kevin Hall.
That's more of a complex question than you would originally think. I think as far as staffing, I'm increasing the staff that I have dedicated to this program, both my mental health program and the deflection program. Staffing is always going to be an issue. We are at essentially in Tucson, we're at about 1995 staffing levels right now, and it is reaching a crisis. It's not that we can't fund the positions, it's that we can't get enough people in the door. We can't get people into the academy. There is a lack of interest in becoming a police officer, and that's a national problem. I think the Phoenix Valleys are in the same boat. I guess the quick answer to your question is the infrastructure we need are the service providers, the folks who provide substance misuse treatment, mental health treatment, who we're lucky enough to have a crisis response center and a 24/7 clinic. Phoenix has both of those. I don't think anywhere else other than these two metropolitan areas in the state have those resources.
Did you have a follow-on? Okay. So, Mr. Roberts and then Mr. Bolden and then.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think my question is more specific towards the program in Tucson, but kind of relevant to all of them. So it says here, as of this month, 700 deflections from felony or misdemeanor charges to treatment, and then there was another figure I think that included, it was around 1,100 nationwide. I'm kind of wanting to know, how are we, from a recidivism aspect, looking at this? Because if there's no charges being filed, is there a record of who's being entered into these programs? And after they've completed the program, are we looking at whether or not, what kind of success we're having in keeping them out of the criminal justice system? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, sir. That's an excellent question. Thank you. We engaged, I felt it was extraordinarily important when I was researching this project. There is little to no research out there, academic, peer-reviewed, validated research. We engaged the University of Arizona to become our research partner. We are tracking both our deflections and the folks that were potentially able to be deflected, but for whatever reason weren't. So we're tracking both. We're looking for recidivism rates. We're looking for treatment engagement at 3, 6, 12, and 18 months. We're looking at what we can do better. And in that sense, we decided that giving all 400 of my patrol officers motivational interviewing is going to help the engagement factor. One of the things we learned from that, from those being able to track all of these different aspects, is that almost 50% of the folks that were offered deflection, that had the option to go to treatment rather than jail, refused it. They either said, I don't have a problem, I'm not addicted, or I'm not ready to go to that yet. So there's still an issue there where we're still addressing a population that is historically distrustful of law enforcement. But we are tracking all those. The program is only, as far as the evaluation piece, is only about 8 months in. We need to look a little bit more long term. But I would suggest, and I push this throughout the country, if you're going to start one of these programs, you have to engage an academic researcher to help you to track these things. And I would also say, just on the flip side, that anybody who gets into treatment as opposed to to jail and incarceration is going to be far better off for the community as a whole. It's a community health project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bolden?
And Assistant Chief Hall, this question is and I do have one for Assistant Chief Humble as well. Okay. Mr. Chair, Assistant Chief Hall, so with regards to the deflections, so is it, do we have a non-deflection number? So we know 700, if we know the number of 700 deflections, do we know the non-deflection number?
Don't quote me on this. I'm roughly guessing from the last numbers I saw, it's going to be around 1,800.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm sorry. I have a couple more questions. Mr. Chair, Assistant Chief Hall. So, is there any tracking? Well, I would imagine the deflections is at the discretion of the officer. Is there any tracking on the actual deflections? So, how do you go about the tracking? Is it, whether the conversation that's had? How do you go about the tracking of a deflection versus non-deflection?
So our research partner established a survey. So every time there is a deflection or there is a non-deflection, somebody who could have been deflected but instead was arrested and booked, the officer has to fill out a survey that answers a list of questions about why the person wasn't deflected or why they were arrested, as opposed to the opposite. It also covers everything from the demographics of the individual, because officer discretion, We're very concerned about racial disparities and ethnic disparities, so we track that as well. Through that, our researcher anonymizes the information, sends it back to me in a report, so I can look at it, and that's how we determined we needed motivational interviewing. And we're probably going to look at some trauma-informed care integration as well. So more training. We already provide 5 hours of training to all the officers before they begin deflecting, mostly on the neurobiology of addiction and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and trauma, and MAT practices. So yes, through the survey we gain a lot of information. We look at it. It's a dynamic, moving program, and I take that information and we start making tweaks to the program.
Thank you.
Oh, did you have a question?
No,
You're
it was
good?
actually asked already.
Okay. Anyone can answer this. Well, actually, the first one is to the homeless folks, the officers that work with the homeless folks. Those encounters that you have, anyone can stand up that's involved in this. Thank you, officer. Those encounters that you have with the homeless, is there an amount that are inmates, that are former inmates?
Yes, there are.
Do y'all have a number?
No, I don't have
Really?
a number, but
Okay.
there are several that we work with that are.
Former inmates?
Yes.
And do you have like a timeline of how long they've been homeless, or they've been out of jail for 6 months, 3 months, and they're homeless? And are y'all are able to track that, or?
We can. We haven't been, and actually, after being here today, I think I will start tracking that.
Okay.
But there's one couple in particular that I'm thinking of. They're both ex-inmates, and I think they've been homeless ever since they were released about 8 to 10 years ago. So as soon as they got released from prison, they had no place to go, and they're on the streets.
Are they still? I know you said 8 to 10 years, but are they still connected to the system where they have to report?
No, they
They're
don't.
not connected to the system.
No parole or probation.
All right. Okay. Are you seeing those that are still connected to the system that are homeless being returned back to prison?
We haven't seen that. I haven't seen that yet. But we've only been doing this
Okay.
for a year, so it's possible we're going to run into
That's
that.
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I actually have a follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sort of anecdotally, if you have data on this, it'd be great. But from your experience, what would you say is how many of the people that are homeless are sort of chronically homeless, maybe for mental health reasons or other types of reasons that are related to that, versus, say, barriers to just being able to get a job, as you mentioned, or barriers to being able to get a place to live? Do you have any data on that, or just your personal feeling on it?
That is a good question. It's nothing that I've kept stats on, which I probably will have to start working with our person in the department that does that. But just from working with these people every day, I'd say it's probably over 90% that have some sort of mental health issue or substance use issues. So almost everyone.
Okay. Representative Bolden. I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sergeant Ward.
Yes.
What initiates a contact? I know within what you were saying, one individual, you had 100 contacts. What initiates a contact?
But for the homeless outreach team, we purposely go out to talk to them. It's a consensual contact in most cases. Like the people who live in our retention areas, we drive down there to do welfare checks. If they don't want to talk to us, they don't have to. It's for us, it's more of a welfare check. Or we get a call because someone's trespassing at a Circle K or a QT. We see them walking down the street. We stop to talk to them because we want them to know we're not there looking to, for lack of a better term, to jam them up. We're there to offer them resources. We want to get them help if they want it, because obviously we don't want people living on the streets or succumbing to their addictions. We want to help them get out of that situation. So I guess it's more a welfare check. They know we're coming. They all know who we are now after a year, so they know that we're just there to talk to them and check on them.
And Mr. Chair, Sergeant Ward, so, and you answered part of the question I was going to ask. Like, one, do they know that this is just a conversation? And then second, has a welfare check ever translated into anything further?
Yes, it has. Especially, like, so we go down into the desert areas or the retention areas, and we walk up to an encampment, and this has happened. We've caught people shooting up heroin right in front of us, and at that point, it's like, well, you know, now we have to work with this. So.
I see.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Chair,
Representative Bullock?
Sergeant Ward, can you tell me about your partnership with the Phoenix Rescue Mission and the Deflection program?
Yes, we work quite a bit with the Phoenix Rescue Mission. I know they work part-time with Avondale, which is our neighboring city, and part-time with us. And once a week, well, we'll go out and actually do outreach with them. We're doing outreach every day, but once a week we'll partner up with them. And at any time that we run across someone who wants help, wants to go into the Phoenix Rescue Mission, we can just call them. They'll come out and meet us. We go down and see them. We also work with them in finding people who need stuff like ID vouchers. They don't have a Social Security card. And we let the people that we work with know that and say, you know, if you need us, you need something from Phoenix Rescue Mission, give us a call and we'll direct them down to you or come down with them.
You work with the Homeless ID Project as well?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Chairman, if I may, there was
Yes.
a couple of follow-up answers that I had.
Okay. Representative DeGrazia has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I just had a quick follow-up question. I'm looking at the Illinois Deflection program that ties generally into opioid disorders, overdoses, that type of thing. They have a component of their program that the state does some kind of tracking with regard to data analytics and compilation. Do you have any idea how much that costs? Because I know the Illinois program doesn't require an appropriation of any money, which is kind of the proposal here, as I understand it. I'm just curious if there are any, first of all, any other subset monies that would be required to fully implement the Illinois-style deflection program. Secondarily, if there have been any blowback as far as lawsuits or anything that the police forces have incurred any type of liability on the public sector for a deflection type program.
Sure. Chairman, Representative and members, I can answer part of that question and then I'll defer to either Kevin or Attorney Dean, whoever can best answer it. So my understanding is that the funding, especially on the Tucson side, has largely come from grants. And so there are a number of grants out there, but in my personal opinion, I don't think we have enough grants to satisfy the need that we'd have here in Arizona. And that comes from my experience of serving in Councilman DeCicio's office doing a research project on criminal justice and homelessness. I'm not sure if either one of you have any more of a specific answer to give to that.
I think that really varies. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Dean. I'm an attorney working with this subcommittee. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. I think that really, the answer is it could be either way. I think there are a lot of resources out there that we're looking at. Different organizations around the state of Arizona that are already working with, say, the courts in programs that they have doing diversions or deferred prosecutions, and having those resources available. No doubt, additional resources would open up more options, I think, for people, and however that they may come by grants or otherwise. But I think that the way it's working now, and it is working in these jurisdictions, is there isn't any additional real grants that are going into this, at least not that I'm aware of. It's more of an internal program that seems to be working. So, and obviously it saves money over time, but I think that either way, grants or otherwise, the resources are available and the program can work. So I'm not sure, and I'm sorry that I don't know the details of the Illinois program well enough to directly compare and contrast, but
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, there's 3 questions that I wanted to provide more information on follow-up answers, if I
Yeah.
may. Chairman, members, so the 3 points I wanted to bring up is, first, the question was on how many people have past criminal histories in the homelessness or the deflection programs. In my research that I did for the council office, I found that in general, it was over 90% of the people that are being engaged in these programs already had past history of criminal charges. The second question was how many experienced mental illness, and in my research that I did with the Human Services Campus in Phoenix and also the Phoenix Rescue Mission, it's typically over 90%. It's well more than the majority. And then the third one was other barriers, and that overall, in my research in that, and I also went homeless for a night so that I can engage the homeless and understand this community and what their challenges are. A couple of areas is, one, people are afraid to enter into services because there's usually someone that they have as a friend, someone that's part of their inner community that they're afraid to leave behind. And if it's someone from the opposite sex, then they will not be allowed to have housing with that person. And so there's many cases where men, for example, wanted to be protective over women because they had been victims of sexual assault while living on the street, and they didn't want to have that person have to experience that in the system. And then the second area is pets. There's a lot of people that have companions that are pets, and they basically act as a comfort. And they may not be official service animals, but for these folks, they are. And we don't have facilities to house both people and their service animals. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimonies today from the law enforcement officers. Again, we appreciate your service to our state and to our cities. And we appreciate the extra effort that you are doing for diversionary programs and to take care of some of these folks that are